the previous videos we created a couple different methods with a basic simple method that just took in no parameters and it returned nothing back. It was void, but it just basically ran a command to close our application and have a message box that said goodbye. Then we moved on in order to take a parameter or to use a parameter by taking an argument and basically running the calculation on it, which you can see right here, convert to feet. We also decided to do, and we returned nothing here, it was void. Now we also decided to return something back as well as taking in a parameter. And what we did here, when I first did it, I just had a double in there. Basically it returned back a single value. I decided I needed to return back more than one value, so I used an array rather than just a single value variable. And so the array allows us to return back several things. Now what I'd like to do is I'm going to rewrite the code here, make it a little simpler, but I want to use more than one argument within my method. So I'm just going to go ahead, I'll highlight this code because I do want to use this code again for the conversion, dividing it by 36 and using the remainder and so forth. So I'll just copy that. But I'm going to get rid of my convert to yards. I also want to get rid of my convert to feet methods. So those are gone. Let's take a quick look at the design view of this application. And I'm going to move a couple of these objects down. If you hold the shift key, you can select more than one. And you can actually use your arrows if you want to move items down. Just move those down. I'll use the shift key one more time here to select both of those, the label and the text box. Do a control C and control V to copy that, and I'll move them over there underneath here. What I want to do now is deselect them and then just select the text box and give the text box a name. I'll just call this TXT unit of measure. And then the label is going to just simply say, and we're going to ask the user for yards with a Y or feet with a capital F. And that's going to allow us the option here of now two different things to look at rather than just one. So let's go back to our code, and I'm going to go ahead and remove those lines of code from my click event because those methods are no longer there. Okay, so let's go ahead and create ourselves a brand new one. So I'm going to go ahead and use private again, and it means it's only going to be able to be used within my class, which is just fine. We're going to also say void. I'm not going to return anything this time at all. And so there's nothing going to need to be returned, so I might as well just say void. And let's give it a name, convert to yards or feet. And now what I want to do is I want to actually take in two arguments on this one. So I'm going to use two parameters here. The first one, let's go ahead and use an int. This is going to be my inches. So I'll just call this one inches. The second one is going to be a string. Now this is going to take what they've typed in, whether it's Y or F for my yards or feet. And I'm going to go ahead and say on this particular one, let's just call this unit of measure. There we go. And so let's go ahead and opening and closing curly braces. There we go. So now what I want to do is create some variables for us to work with. I'm going to go ahead and say int, and let's go ahead and say yard. And let's go ahead and by default I'm going to set it to equal to 0. Let's go ahead and do int feet. Set that equal to 0 by default. And then int inches. We'll set that equal to 0 as well. That's just our defaults. Now let's go ahead and begin our conditions. Let's say that if the inches, or actually let's do unit of measure is equal to, and let's go ahead and say Y to begin with. This is going to be if the condition is yards. Let's go ahead then and run our code. Use my curly braces. This is the code that I'd like to run if that was the case. So I'm going to go ahead and say, let's see, I'll do a control V and paste in. Actually, I must have copied those text boxes so I don't have it in memory anymore. So let's just go ahead and type it out. We're going to say that the yard is going to, that's our variable that we're working with here, is going to equal the inches divided by 36. Then we're going to go ahead and say feet is going to equal our inches, and then we're going to use the remainder or the modulus of 36, and then we're going to divide that by 12. And then our last one is inches is going to equal the remainder here of, let's see, inches, remainder 12. There we go. So that's our code. I'm going to also do a addition to the list box that we've got. So lst output dot items dot add. We're just going to go ahead and say that the yards, let's see, there we're going to be, let's see, yard. I'm going to add to it this little label to go with it. Yards plus feet plus inches. And notice this is with a capital I versus the lowercase I. There is a difference here in my variables. There we go. So that's my code for if it ends up being the unit of measure is y. Now let's go ahead, copy this, and I'm going to do an if statement right below it again. This time if the unit of measure is f. For feet, I'm going to go ahead and remove yard. And for the feet, I no longer need to use the 36. So let's just go ahead and say it's going to be inches divided by 12. And then we got the remainder. And I can now remove the yard section of my list box. There we go. So now I've got a condition, whether it's going to be yards or feet. So I've got different conditions running, different code running for this. So let's go up to my click method, and we need to call this actual method to run. Before I do that, I actually need to pull out of the text box whether it's going to be feet or yards. So let's just go ahead and say string, and let's say it's equal to, or let's go to give it a name, unit of measure. Say it's going to be equal to the txt unit of measure dot text. And what we could do here is just to make sure that if they put an uppercase in there, whatever they type in, I'm just going to go ahead and make sure it's all uppercase. So we're just going to go ahead and say that's to upper. And I'll need to put at the end of this the opening curly brace for that method. There we go. So now we've got the two different values of the text boxes stored in our variables, and so what I want to do now is actually call that method that we've got to work. Convert to yards or feet. So I'll just go ahead and type that in. Convert to yards or feet. I'll go ahead and start with the opening parenthesis, and you're going to notice that I've got two different arguments for this, parameters that it will use. The first one is going to be an integer, the second one is going to be a string. So I'm going to look here and say the integer is going to be inches, and the second one is going to be unit of measure, a variable unit of measure. So now we'll go ahead and end that with a semicolon, and let's go ahead and run our application. So enter a number of inches, let's go 78. And I'll do a lowercase y and hit calculate. It tells me that is in yards, 2 yards, 0 feet, 6 inches. Let's go ahead and change this up to an f. And it only gives it to me in feet and inches. And so this is our application that we used two different arguments for the method that we created.